The wind howled across the red clay hills like a mourning widow. Dust swirled through the bones of the dying town of Red Hollow, slipping under doors and into the cracks of every weather-beaten building, including the crooked little shack at the edge of town where Martha Whitlow lived. She stirred a pot over a creaking fire, stirring slowly, methodically, like someone who had nothing better to do and no one waiting on her. The stew was mostly turnip and a little hope. She'd added the last scrap of bacon she had 2 nights ago. Now it was just her, the turnips, and silence. Martha was 35, broad in the hips, sturdy in the arms, with the kind of face folks politely called homely. Too poor to dress it up, too smart to pretend it didn't matter. Red Hollow had whispered about her since she was 20, first with pity, then with disdain, and now with boredom. She'd grown thick where other women had grown elegant, her dresses letting out seams year after year while the world passed her by. Once, she'd had dreams of owning a bakery. There had been a time, years ago, when the scent of fresh dough and cinnamon had meant something to her, something close to freedom. But dreams had a way of going stale in Red Hollow. Her parents were long dead. Her brother had gambled away the family land, then skipped town when she was 23. And ever since, she'd been trying to survive in the leftover pieces of a life that had never fit quite right. Her dog, Beans, limped across the dusty floor and set his head on her knee. He was half blind, missing part of an ear, and smelled perpetually of river muck. But he was loyal, and he didn't care she had strong shoulders or that her fingers were calloused from kneading dough and chopping wood. Martha looked out the window at the setting sun, casting a crimson glow on the landscape. Another day, another nothing. The knock on her door startled her. No one visited, not unless they wanted something. She opened the door a crack. It was Sheriff Tillman, red-nosed and always half-drunk by sundown. "Martha," he said, tipping his hat in that slow, pitiful way. "There's going to be a dance at the town hall next week. All the ladies are bringing pies. Just letting you know." She stared at him. "Is that a request or a warning?" He chuckled uneasy. "Just thought you might want to feel part of things. I've made peace with not." He opened his mouth, maybe to say something sympathetic, but she shut the door before he could. A pie for the town dance. She could see it already, the smirks, the whispers. How the banker's daughter would laugh behind her lace fan, and some fool cowboy would pretend to court her as a joke. She'd seen it before. The way they made a show of trying to find poor Martha a man, as if she was a stray dog to be pitted or a challenge for a drunken dare. But that night, something different stirred inside her. A quiet fury, not fire-hot, but heavy and old, like embers under ash. She didn't deserve this life. Not really, but no one had come to save her, and she wasn't the sort to beg. The next morning, she grabbed her basket and headed into the hills. There were berries up near Widow's Creek, and if she could gather enough, she could make something sweet. Not for the dance, for herself. The walk was long, the path winding and overgrown. Thorns snagged her dress. The sun beat down like judgment, but she pressed on, swatting bugs, huffing through the brambles, until she reached the creek. Birds chirped overhead. The cool rush of water soothed her boots. And nestled near the bank were the berries, plump, wild, and blood-red. She reached down and began to gather, humming to herself. Then the silence shifted. Beans growled low. Martha froze, her hand full of berries. The rustling was too loud for a rabbit, too purposeful. She turned slowly, and her heart slammed in her chest. A wild boar stood just 30 paces away, tusks glinting, eyes fixed on her. It was enormous. Its bristled hide quivered with muscle and rage. She didn't scream. Martha dropped the berries and picked up the biggest stick she could find. The boar pawed the earth, snorted, and charged. She swung. The stick cracked across its snout, and it screamed, an awful gurgling sound. It reared back and charged again. She ran, but the ground was uneven. She stumbled, fell, rolled. It came for her again, faster than anything that size should be. Beans barked, trying to distract it, but it didn't care. She scrambled for her knife, a small thing she carried in her apron. Useless, but she held it anyway. Then a shot rang out. The boar jerked mid-charge and collapsed just feet from her. Dust and blood filled the air. Its legs twitched once, then went still. Martha blinked. Her hands trembled. A figure on horseback appeared through the brush. "Ma'am," he said, swinging down. "You all right?" He was young, mid-20s at most. Broad-shouldered, sun-kissed skin, eyes the color of river stones. A rifle slung over his back, a lopsided smile on his face. She nodded, heart still racing. "I was just picking berries." He looked at the carcass, then back at her. "Well, you damn near picked a fight with death. That was brave." "Was stupid." "Brave and stupid. Best kind." She stood, brushing off dirt. "I didn't need rescuing." He raised an eyebrow. "Seemed like you had it handled with a twig and a paring knife." She smirked despite herself. "Could have gotten a few good stabs in before it gored me." He reached for her hand, helped her up with surprising gentleness. "I'm Caleb," he said. "Caleb Dunham." The name hit her like a slap. Dunham, as in Dunham Ranch, the richest family in the entire county. His father practically owned half the land west of the river. Folks called him King Dunham behind his back. "And this boy was his son? What are you doing way out here?" she asked, wiping sweat from her brow. "Exploring. Escaping. Bit of both." He looked around, then at her again. "You live nearby?" She hesitated, "Just south of town." His eyes didn't flicker with recognition. Maybe he hadn't heard the stories. Maybe he didn't know who she was. "That was good swing, and by the way," he added, "you got arms like a lumberjack." She laughed before she could stop herself. "Well," she said, "you got charm like a fox and timing like a miracle." Caleb grinned, reached into his saddlebag, and pulled out a canteen. "Care for some water? I'm told it's the polite thing after savon someone from a boar." She drank. He watched her with easy interest, no mockery, no judgment. "Just interest." "I'd offer you some stew," she said, "but it's mostly turnip and poor decisions." He chuckled. "Best stew I ever had was made of squirrel, whiskey, and regret. So I ain't picky." They talked for a while longer, nothing urgent, just the kind of drifting conversation that feels like a warm fire in a cold room. He was easy to be around. No stammering, no sideways glances at her hips or awkward comments about her age. Just talk, real and simple. As the sun dipped low, he finally stood to go. "Will I see you again?" She tilted her head. "You plan on rescuing more women from wild hogs?" "I was thinking maybe I'd drop by sometime. Help fix your roof, if you got one that leaks." She hesitated, her heart confused, tangled between defense and yearning. "You don't know who I am," she said. He paused. "Do I need to?" She said nothing. "All right, then," he said, mounting his horse. "I'll bring nails, maybe some flour if you bake." "I used to," she said softly. "Well," he tipped his hat, "let's see if you remember how." And with that, he rode off, the setting sun casting gold over his silhouette. Martha stood there long after he vanished, staring at the trail, the dead boar, the crushed berries scattered in the dust. No one had looked at her like that in years. Not like a joke, not like a bird, like a woman. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Martha Whitlow didn't feel like she was waiting to die. She felt like something was about to begin. The first time Caleb returned, it was just after sunrise. Martha had barely finished feeding beans and splitting a fresh stack of kindling when she heard the steady crunch of hooves along the dry path leading to her cabin. She stepped out, apron dusted in flour, brow furrowed. He was already grinning when he dismounted. "Morning, Miss Whitlow," he said, tipping his hat. "You remembered my name," she replied, surprised. "Well, when a woman nearly kills a boar with a stick, it tends to stick in a man's memory." She tried not to smile, but her cheeks betrayed her. "You really came back?" "I brought flour like I promised, and nails. Figured we could see if your oven still has life in it, and your roof too." Martha opened the door wide. "Hope you don't expect anything too fancy. Most of my recipes died from neglect." Inside, the cabin was cleaner than he remembered, sparse but homey. Her fire still crackled in the hearth. He set the supplies on the table and looked around. "You fix the shutters," he noted. "I fix what I can," she replied, pulling out a bowl. "I was poor before it was fashionable." "I'm not here out of pity," Caleb said plainly. "I'm here because I want to be." She glanced at him uncertain, but something in his voice was too steady to argue with. She began to measure flour, and he rolled up his sleeves to help. The first loaf was terrible, dense, flat, and tasteless. They both spat it out laughing. The second was a little better. The third filled the house with the warm scent of yeast and sugar, and when they pulled it out and tasted the crust, they looked at each other and nodded. Still got it? Caleb said, mouth full. Martha smirked. That was me. Your contribution was burning the first two. He leaned closer. Every good baker needs an assistant to ruin things once in a while. Keeps her humble. For the next few days, he came back often, always with something: fresh eggs, wild honey, a bag of spices from a trader. Sometimes just his stories, always full of wit and wonder. She'd never met a man who smiled so easily or listened so carefully. Most people, if they listened at all, only did it waiting for their turn to speak. With Caleb, she felt heard and seen. They sat beneath the oak tree one night, bread cooling on the windowsill behind them, the horizon burning orange. Why were you really here? She asked quietly. He thought about it. You ever feel like everything folks expect of you is wrong? All the time. He nodded. My family wants me to take over the ranch, marry the banker's daughter, breed horses and count profits till I die. And you don't want that? I want this. He motioned to the loaf behind them. I want a bakery. I want something made by hand, not inheritance. Something warm, not bought. Martha looked down at her flour-dusted fingers. And you think you can get that with me? He turned to her. Martha, you're the first person I've met who doesn't wear a mask. You say what you mean. You fight for yourself. That's rare. She felt her throat tighten, emotion crawling up like a slow burn. I'm not what they want for you. I'm not what they want either. Silence stretched between them. He reached for her hand. I'm not a fool, he said gently. I know how people look at us. You're older. I'm rich. You've had a hard life. I've had too easy a one. But none of that matters if we make something real. She stared at their hands, her pulse thudding in her ears. You don't know what they'll do to you. Let him try, he said. They kissed beneath the oak tree, not soft or shy, but with all the messy, unpracticed emotion of two people who never thought they'd find someone. The next day, everything changed. Word got out. No one said how. Maybe a rider spotted him leaving her place. Maybe the sheriff said something careless. But by dusk, Red Hollow was buzzing. The whispers were cruel. The jokes came fast. Caleb Dunham's corked a hippo, one man laughed at the saloon. Guess he's had a taste for lard with his bread. Martha ignored them. She'd been mocked before. She could survive it again. But Caleb didn't hide. He walked beside her to the market, bought her thread, offered his arm, smiled like a man in love and not ashamed. That night, two riders showed up at her cabin. She didn't open the door, just stared through the window, watching them throw a stone at her steps and ride off laughing. One of them had tied a dress, hers stolen from a line, around a scarecrow with a pig's head. Martha burned it without a word. Caleb came the next morning, saw the ashes, and his face hardened. We need to leave, he said. She folded her arms. This is my home. This is your prison. He took her hand. Come away with me. Let's go north. I've got money stashed. Enough to build a little place. A real bakery. A clean start. I'm 35, Caleb. I've got more past than future. I don't want the future without you. He meant it. She knew it. But something deep inside still resisted, fear, pride, something old and crusted over from too many years alone. That night, they sat on her porch, fire crackling low. I loved someone once, she whispered. A long time ago. He said he'd marry me, that he didn't care what people thought. But when the time came, he walked away. Married a girl half my size with hair like spun gold. Told me he was doing me a kindness. Caleb was quiet for a long while. Then he said, I don't have spun gold, but I got hands that know how to hold on. She looked at him. You really want to marry me? More than anything. The wedding happened 3 mornings later. Quiet, no church, no crowd. Just a preacher from the next town over, standing in the field behind her cabin. Her dress was sewn from curtains. He wore his best shirt and a crooked tie. Beans barked at the horses like he was giving them away. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed her like he'd found something sacred. And Martha cried, not because she was sad or scared, but because for once, life had given her something soft. They didn't get a honeymoon. That night, while they were packing, a rock shattered their window. A note tied to it read, Leave, or we'll bury her. Caleb wanted to fight. Martha said no. We run. We live. By morning, they were gone. They rode north, traveling by night. Slept beneath trees, forded rivers, lived on cornbread and coffee. Caleb carried her when her feet blistered. She hunted rabbits when his shoulder ached. They were equals, not rescuers. Not rescued. One day, they stopped beside a wide river. The sky was overcast, the wind sharp. Caleb was quiet, staring out across the water. "What is it?" she asked. He hesitated. "My father sent my brother after us." Her blood ran cold. "How do you know?" "Because he left a sign, a cut in the bark, same way we used to track cattle." She gripped the rifle tighter. "You regret it?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not one damn second." That night, they huddled close under the tarp, rain tapping steady on canvas. Martha listened to Caleb's heartbeat, steady against her cheek. "You still want that bakery?" she asked softly. He laughed into her hair. "More than ever." "Then we'll build it." His arms tightened around her. "Even if they come for us?" "Especially if they come for us." The storm passed. They rode deeper into the mountains, hoping to find a town where no one knew her name. No one cared who his father was. They found an old abandoned shack half collapsed, near a creek lined with pines. It had no roof, no door, and smelled like squirrel droppings. But it had good bones. "This could work," Caleb said, grinning. Martha stood in the doorway, wind blowing her hair wild. "We'll need windows and an oven, a proper one. We'll build it." That night, they made love beneath the stars, a blanket pulled tight around them, and the scent of pine in the air. It was clumsy and sweet and perfect in the way only two broken people finding comfort can be. They slept wrapped in each other, dreaming not of fear or fire, but of sugar, yeast, and the warmth of something rising. By morning, Martha woke first. She stepped outside barefoot, looking at the clearing, the creek, the trees. For the first time, the world didn't feel like a place that had rejected her. It felt like something waiting to be claimed. She turned as Caleb stepped out beside her, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Morning, Mrs. Dunham." She smiled. "You hungry?" "Starving." "Then let's build a damn bakery." The days that followed were hard, but they were theirs. Caleb and Martha worked with calloused hands and aching backs, dragging lumber from nearby ruins, chopping fallen trees, crafting what they could with little more than rusted tools and stubborn will. Each plank nailed into place, each brick stacked for their future oven, was a small defiance against wealth, against expectation, against the ghosts of a life neither wanted anymore. They found rhythm in the wilderness. Caleb built while Martha cooked. She gathered wild onions and nettles, hunted rabbits with a slingshot, and stitched blankets from old feed sacks. Caleb fished in the creek, set traps for game, and read to her by firelight from a water-damaged almanac they'd found in the shack. At night, wrapped beneath wool, their bodies pressed together, they whispered dreams of sourdough, gingerbread, pies with lattice crusts, and a shop window with her name painted in gold. Sometimes they spoke of Red Hollow. Mostly they didn't. Martha had never felt younger or more alive. In the quiet between chores, she caught a reflection in the creek. Not thinner, not prettier, but fuller somehow. Her eyes held light again. Her laughter came easier. And when Caleb touched her, he did so like he'd found something sacred. Then one morning, she woke to silence. No crackle of fire. No whistle from the pot. No Caleb humming off key while chopping wood. "Caleb," she called, stepping into the clearing. His horse was gone. She spun, breath hitching. Beans, now grayer and slower, whined and sniffed the air. He trotted to the tree, nose down. Her heart beat in her throat as she followed. Near the edge of the woods, she found it, a small patch of churned dirt, hoof prints, and a broken twig still swaying. Caleb had been taken. She saw the drag marks, the scuffed boot prints. He hadn't gone willingly. She dropped to her knees, pressing her fingers into the tracks, reading them the way her father once taught her. 3 horses, 2 riders, one being dragged. They'd headed north. Martha stood, eyes burning. "Bean, stay." She packed fast, rifle jerky, her hunting knife, a handful of nails she stuffed into her coat pocket. Then she saddled her own mare and rode like the devil was on her heels. The forest narrowed into dense, pine-choked hills. Ravens watched from above. Somewhere a hawk cried out. Hours passed. Her thighs ached. The horse huffed beneath her. But she didn't stop. Not when the trail narrowed. Not when her gut twisted with fear. By dusk she smelled smoke. She tied the horse to a tree and crept forward on foot. Below, in a rocky clearing, a campfire flickered. 2 men sat beside it. One of them was Caleb's older brother, Josiah, recognizable by the slick blonde hair and permanent sneer. The other was unfamiliar, grizzled, with sharp eyes and a jagged scar across his neck. Caleb lay nearby, tied at the wrists, lips split, shirt bloodied. Martha's hand tightened on her rifle. "You think she'll come?" the scarred man asked. "Oh, she'll come," Josiah drawled. "She's dumb enough to believe this is love. All pigs are. Soft, stupid creatures." The other man laughed. Caleb stirred, groaned. Martha's vision narrowed. She moved through the trees like a shadow, circling the camp until she found a better angle. From her perch, she could see Caleb's face. One eye swollen shut, but alive. She breathed in, out, and then the branch beneath her snapped. Both men stood instantly, guns drawn. Martha bolted. Shots rang out. Bark exploded beside her. She hit the ground hard, rolling behind a boulder. Her ribs screamed. Dirt filled her mouth. "Come on out, sweetheart," Josiah called. "We just want a little talk." She didn't answer. Her heart thundered in her ears. The rifle dug into her side. "You really think he's worth it?" the scarred man yelled. "A boy like him choosing you? You're a joke." That did it. She rose, took aim, and fired. The bullet caught the scarred man in the leg. He screamed, collapsing into the fire. Chaos exploded. Josiah shouted. Caleb shouted something back. Martha couldn't hear. Another shot grazed her arm. Pain lanced up to her shoulder, but she kept moving, kept firing. She rushed the camp like a storm, barrel smoking, mouth dry. Caleb rolled away from the fire, shouting her name. She reached him, dropped to her knees, cut the rope at his wrist with her knife. "Get up," she rasped. "We're going. I told you to stay safe. Shut up and run." They sprinted into the woods as more shots echoed behind them. Caleb stumbled once, but she pulled him forward, teeth gritted. Her arm throbbed. Blood ran hot down her sleeve. They ran for what felt like hours. Only when the moon was high did they stop, lungs burning, bodies shaking. Martha collapsed against a tree, breath ragged. Caleb knelt beside her, touching her face like she might vanish. "You got shot," he said, horrified. "It's not bad," she lied. "I've burned myself worse." He started to argue, but she reached up and kissed him. Not soft. Fierce? "I will not bury you," she whispered. "Do you hear me? I already buried too much of my life." He held her tight. "I'm not going anywhere." They stayed hidden for 2 days. Martha's arm stiffened, but the bleeding stopped. Caleb insisted on cleaning the wound, and though his hands shook, his voice stayed calm. He told her about the ambush, how Josiah and that scarred bastard had grabbed him while he was fetching water, how they planned to drag him home, marry him off, break him like a horse. "They said you'd forget me eventually," he murmured. Martha chuckled, pained. "Fools." On the 3rd morning, they rode again, through valley and ridge, under the ever-watching sky. They found a small town nestled between hills, too quiet to ask questions. They paid a carpenter to help reinforce a cabin, traded bread for lumber. The scars on Caleb's face faded. The one on Martha's arm didn't, but she wore it like a badge. They built again, not just a home, but a storefront. Windows, a real oven, a sign above the door that read, "The Rising Sun Bakery." On opening day, no one came. By day 3, the smell of bread drew them in, farmhands, widows, hungry children. By day 7, a woman from the church asked for the recipe to Martha's cinnamon rolls. They never spoke of Red Hollow, but one evening a rider appeared, dust-covered and road-worn. He didn't enter, just watched from the edge of the clearing. Martha stepped out, rifle in hand. It was Josiah. His eyes, hard, red-rimmed, met hers. He said nothing. She didn't blink. He turned, rode off without a word. Later that night, Martha and Caleb sat on the porch, sharing a slice of honey pie. Her stitches had healed. His lip was whole, but something lingered between them, a silence more powerful than words. You afraid he'll come back? Caleb asked. No, she said. He saw what he needed to. What's that? That I'm not running anymore. Caleb nodded slowly, then grinned. You're the toughest woman I've ever met. She smirked. I've killed a boar, baked bread in a fire pit, and shot a man for you. You better appreciate that. Oh, I do, he said, drawing her close. Every damn day. They sat until the stars blinked into view, the night calm, the world finally quiet. And for once there was no chase, no fear, no flight. Just the smell of rising dough, and love that refused to die. The sign swung gently in the morning breeze, its hand-carved letters gleaming in gold. The Rising Sun Bakery. Below it, a line of townsfolk stretched along the wooden sidewalk, boots tapping impatient rhythms, noses tilted up to catch the scent of honey glaze and warm cinnamon. Martha stood behind the counter, cheeks dusted with flour, sleeves rolled high. Her hands moved with practiced rhythm, folding, slicing, lifting steaming loaves onto trays. Her scarred arm no longer made her flinch. It was a reminder now of a life she'd fought for and nearly died to keep. Caleb moved among the tables, greeting regulars, refilling mugs with strong black coffee. He wore a linen shirt rolled to the sleeves, his hair longer now, untamed by town expectations. When his eyes met hers across the room, there was still that flicker of awe, as though he couldn't quite believe she was real. They had been in Silver Creek for 3 months, long enough to be known, not long enough to be forgotten. The townsfolk had warmed to them quickly, drawn first by the food, then by the feeling. The bakery was more than bread. It was refuge. Something about the place made people speak softly, linger longer, laugh louder. Martha had transformed, not in shape, but in spirit. There was a brightness to her, a force behind her words, her posture, her gaze. She'd learned how to command space without apology, how to smile without bracing for insult. She didn't need defending. She was the defense. But peace, she knew, was always temporary. The first warning came on a Tuesday just after sunrise. Caleb found it nailed to the post out front, a single white feather, clean and sharp. The symbol of the Dunham Ranch, of surrender or of demand. He brought it in without a word and set it gently on the counter. Martha stared at it for a long moment. They found us, she said flatly. Caleb nodded. Neither spoke of leaving. By dusk, the line outside had thinned, but the tension inside had not. They won't come quietly, Caleb murmured as they closed up shop. My father doesn't do quiet. He'll bring muscle, lawyers, guns. If it comes to that, let them, Martha said. He hesitated. They'll make it ugly. She turned to face him. I am ugly. That's what they think, isn't it? Ugly, fat, worthless, the shame of their son. His eyes flared. You know I don't believe that. I do. I just needed to say it first. She walked to the window and looked out over the hills where storm clouds were gathering. They think they can scare us out, or buy us off, or make us small. But I've been small. I've been quiet. I've been nothing to everyone for so long, I almost forgot I was something to myself. He stepped behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. They're not going to win, he whispered. No, she agreed. They're not. 2 nights later, the Dunhams arrived. 6 riders, polished saddles, rifle scabbards. Josiah at the lead, clean-shaven, grinning like a man with a loaded gun and no conscience. Behind him, their father, Ambrose Dunham, rode tall and cold, suit spotless, eyes sharp as a hawk's. The townsfolk scattered like leaves. Doors shut. Curtains twitched. Martha stepped out onto the porch before they could dismount. Caleb stood beside her, jaw set. Josiah spat into the dirt. Didn't think pigs knew how to run bakeries. Martha didn't flinch. Didn't think cowards showed up with 6 men to threaten 2. Ambrose dismounted slowly. His boots landed with heavy finality. I gave you time, he said to Caleb, voice smooth and venomous. Time to come home. Time to fix your mistake. You wasted it. Caleb's hand dropped to his side, near the rifle leaning against the doorframe. She's not a mistake, he said. Ambrose's mouth curled into a sneer. She's nothing. Martha stepped forward, 1 foot on the ground, her hands empty but steady. I've scrubbed blood from my porch, dug, let out of my arm. Watchmen ride off thinking they'd broken me. I've faced boars, bullets, and your pathetic attempts at shame. You want to fight, old man? Her voice rang across the clearing. Then shoot me, right here, in front of his sign, in front of your son, in front of a town that now knows me not as fat, not as unwanted, but as Martha Whitlow Dunham, owner of the finest damn bakery between here and the Rio. Josiah laughed. You think anyone here will stop us? Martha didn't blink. No, but I will. A silence fell like a heavy curtain. Then the door behind her creaked open. The townsfolk had returned. Quietly, steadily, they emerged, rifles in hand, forming a half-moon behind Martha. The school teacher, the carpenter, the widow with the limp. Even the sheriff, rifle across his chest, gave a slow nod. Ambrose's eyes narrowed. You want a war? Martha asked. Start it. Ambrose looked at Caleb. You'll lose everything. The land, the money, the name. I've already gained more than that, Caleb replied. I gained her. Ambrose stared for a long, heavy moment. Then he turned to Josiah. This town's not worth the blood. Josiah's smile faltered. But, mount up. The Dunhams rode off, their silhouettes swallowed by the dusk. Not a shot fired. When they were gone, Martha exhaled slowly. The townsfolk lingered. Some clapped her on the shoulder. Others offered quiet praise. But most simply nodded, eyes filled with something approaching reverence. Caleb kissed her forehead. You did that, he said. No, she whispered. We did. The next morning, the line outside the bakery was longer than ever. Martha baked with fire in her bones, with pride in her chest, with joy she didn't know she was capable of. She watched Caleb laugh with a child over spilled jam, watched the sun stream in through their windows, and felt the final stone of doubt fall from her heart. She was no one's shame, no man's mistake, no town's punchline. She was the woman he chose, and more importantly, she was the woman who chose herself. Later that night, as the stars blinked to life and the scent of bread faded into the cool air, Martha sat on the porch with Caleb beside her, his hand in hers. Think they'll come back, he asked. They might, she said. And if they do? She smiled. Then I'll bake something special, with a touch of cinnamon and a whole lot of vengeance. He laughed, head tipped back to the stars. The world, once so cruel, was finally quiet. And this time she knew it was hers. If this story moved you, like, subscribe, and comment. Share the video, support us with a super chat, or join our memberships to help us create more.